学生们好. This is the fifth of our 7 mini lectures covering the content of Integrated Chinese, the introduction in Integrated Chinese, Book 1, Part 1, 3rd edition. In this lecture, we're going to be looking at the 4 tones plus 1. So we talked about the tones when we introduced the components of the Chinese syllable. And this is the idea that a Chinese syllable also has a tone component is one of the things that is a distinctive aspect of the Chinese language. Many languages have intonation, and we'll talk about how English also has intonation, but it does not have tones. It's not a tonal language. And I want to emphasize what I stated in the first mini lecture, and that is that as a component of a Chinese syllable, the tone, it is just as essential and is just as much a component to the Chinese ear as the syllable's initial and final. And so for a Chinese person, the difference between first tone ma and third tone ma would sound to them as different as if you had a different initial, such as say you had 2 words ma and ba. To them, ma and ba ma ba sound like completely different sounds. To us, it's hard for us to keep that in mind because that's not the case in English, but you need to remember that and keep thinking about that. Eventually it will become sort of part of the way you think about tones, that tone is as important as any other part of the syllable, but it takes a certain amount of training of your ear and your voice to get there. So we need to start working on it as soon as possible. Okay. Let's look at the 4 tones of Mandarin Chinese. As we learned in our first mini lecture, the 3 components of initial, final, and tone, and for each syllable there is a character that, or most likely many characters that corresponds to that combination. And here are 4 different characters for the 4 different tones of the combination ma. So we have ma, 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 ma. 4, as far as the Chinese ear is concerned, these are 4 completely different sounds, and each sound has perhaps many meanings, but it will be a discrete number of meanings. So, going to look at the 4 tones, first of all, I want you to play around a little bit with your personal register. What's the highest point that you can comfortably go, and what's the lowest point you can comfortably go? So try that for a little bit. Go not trying to go too low, not trying to go too high, but just what is comfortable for you. All right. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that everybody's register is going to be a little bit different. I have a pretty high voice, therefore my highest sound, right, the highest point on my personal register is going to be quite a bit higher than some of the men taking the class. On the other hand, their personal 1 is going to be quite a bit lower than what is comfortable for me to go, and that my lowest point, is going to be quite a bit higher than their lowest point. So it's all relative, and so you need to play around with your own voice and get a sense. The main thing to keep in mind, though, is you want to have a space between the highest point and your lowest point, and your characters, your tones should be situated along that space. Okay? Now, let's look at how to make the 4 tones. So, the first tone is a high level tone, stays the same level. So you start at the highest point of your personal register, sustain it for a second, and then you end at the highest point of your personal register. So, for example, with the MA, ma, right, ma. Second tone starts about midway on your personal register and rises to the highest point on your personal register. And this sounds something like ma, ma. Now, as I mentioned, we don't have tones, but we do have intonation, and we do have that sound in the English language. If somebody came up to you and said your name, and you might say yes in that inquiring tone, that is a second tone. So think of that. Think of yes, ma, okay? Third tone starts lower than the second tone, about 0.2 on your personal register, dips to the lowest point, and then comes back up to one level before your highest point, to about 0.4 on your personal register. And this is a full third tone. We will find out later that we don't use full third tones very often, but this is what it sounds like when it's made fully, and that is ma, ma. You can hear that start low, dips lower, goes up, ma. Okay. Then we have a fourth tone, and that starts at the highest point on your personal register and drops all the way to the lowest point on your personal register. Again, using the MA sound, we have ma, ma, right? So one more time with the four tones, we have first tone ma, second tone ma, third tone ma, and fourth tone ma. Here's another way of looking at it, and here you can see, whereas the other one was spread out, but by bunching them together, you can see even more clearly the contrast between the first one. So red, first tone, ma, high and steady. Green, second tone, rising, ma. And purple, starts low, goes lower, goes up, ma. And then we have fourth tone, which is a straight fall from the top of your register to the bottom of your register. Ma. Okay. So we mark them, and the description, which I've already mentioned, we mark the first tone with a straight line, very much like it looks like on your personal register, right? So again, ma, and that tone mark would go over the A. Ma. Second tone, ma, starts medium in tone, and then rises to the top, right? Ma. Third tone, and it looks a bit like what it does on your personal register, except that it's more asymmetrical, but it's a little V image. Starts low, dips to the bottom, then rises towards the top. Not all the way to the top, mind you, but towards the top. So ma, and then fourth tone starts at the top, then falls sharp and strong to the bottom. Ma, ma. And then finally, there is a neutral tone where there's no emphasis. Okay, one more time, looking at this, here's again, a little bit easier to see. You have what the fourth tones look like. First tone, ma, second tone, ma, third tone, ma, fourth tone, ma, neutral tone, ma. And remember in that little jingle that I taught you in our first mini lecture, that mama, mama, we actually have two neutral tones in that sentence. The first one was the ma of mama, right? So mama. And the second one was the very last syllable, mama, mama, right? That is a question mark. And so what neutral tones usually do, they are a tone that doesn't have a full-on meaning by itself. It might give a meaning to either, it might sort of be kind of a dummy syllable. Chinese like to repeat syllables, so we have for family members like mom, mama, we repeat the ma, that's the meaning part, the first one. The second one is just to add a little extra sound, so mama. Doesn't need to have a full tone. The meaning has already been given in the first syllable. The last ma is our question mark. It's a particle that tells me I'm asking a question. And again, it doesn't have meaning in and of itself, but what it does is it adds some information to the whole sentence. In this case, that I'm asking a question. So mama, mama. And this is another sort of implication of tones, whereas we can use an intonation, right, to signal a question. Does mom scold the horse? Right? That's how we go up. They can't, because the tones are already expressing meaning. So the way that we have to talk to make a question is some other way. We can't use intonation to make a question because tones are generating meaning of words. Okay. I mentioned that the tone mark would go over the A in the 4 examples that we've been using of ma, right? The general rule of thumb is that the tone mark appears on the main vowel of a syllable. That's easy when you just have one vowel, like M-A. What if you have several vowels? Well, it's on the main vowel. One way of thinking about that is to think about the sequence in which we learned our simple finals. A, W, E, O, U. That is the order. So A is the most dominant vowel. U is the least dominant. That's one way of doing it. However, that makes it a little tough because there are some exceptions. So the way I like to think of knowing what the main vowel is the vowel where your mouth opens the widest, and that will take care of exceptions. For example, if you look down at the bottom of here, we have yo. Oops. Yo and way, okay, these two combinations. This is actually, right, this is because of pinyin spelling, we have lost our O. And so this is really yo, right? And where's our mouth open the widest? It's on that O, and that U represents that. So yo. And here again, way, right, is really u-a-e, a-e. The I represents the A-E part of it. And again, your mouth is open wider on the A part than on the U part. If you say it again, way, right? Way. So that's where the tone goes. Whatever works for you, but this way you don't have to memorize exceptions. Just think about where your mouth opens the widest, and that's where the tone mark will go. Okay. Neutral tone, as I mentioned before, it's pronounced briefly and softly. And it really doesn't have a meaning in and of itself. So just like it doesn't have a meaning in and of itself, it doesn't really have a full-on tone in and of itself. It is the pitch value they talk about is determined by the stressed syllable. So for example, mama, right? When it occurs before a first tone, the tone value is the pitch value is 2. But I think an easier way to worry about this, because that's a lot of rules to learn, don't worry so much about what the pitch value is. Just emphasize the syllable before it and drop it off, and you'll be fine. So think of, in the case of mama, just hold that the first a little bit longer and drop it off, and you'll be fine. So mama. Okay. Now, to practice. And so we've some things that you can do before and after your written homework to practice. First of all, you can practice the textbook tapes for compound finals and the textbook tapes for tone practice for single syllable words, okay, monosyllabic words. And so this is the place in your textbook, I've got the pages here, that you can practice that. So go to the LRC if you're not there already, or go to the LRC page, the virtual listening lab, and listen to the textbook tapes. Another possibility that's really helpful, a great way to practice with a partner, and this is really more fun, so I urge you to do that, is go to the Yabla site that I have showed you before when I showed you all the different initials, and you can pick any combination. You can pick any tone. And what I would have you do is one person be looking at the chart and picking and writing down maybe 5 to 10 syllables. The other person try to just listen and hear it and practice writing it down. So this is sort of dictation, but without needing a native speaker to do it. Okay? Getting back to the show, another way that you can practice your, if you don't have a partner, is to go to this site here and go to tones. You can also practice initials and finals. And one of the possibilities is choose the tone. So here you see below you have 1, 2, 3, 4. You can hit this, and then you decide what tone that is, mark it. I heard fourth tone, and it will tell you doi, which is correct. If you had happened to hit the wrong tone, let's try another one. Let's listen to this. Okay. I heard third tone, but let's try first tone. See what happens. It says doi, not correct. So you'll know whether you're right or wrong, and then you can try it again. You can listen to it again. You can listen to it as many times as you want. Okay, I think I heard a third tone there. Let's try that. And I got doi. Okay, so these are things that you can do on your own to practice. And tonight you do have homework, so go ahead and do that too. And I will see you in class on Friday.